I'm here to talk about some storage solutions, because in the DMP you really need to write something about on how you're gonna, where you're gonna like have the data stored and how you're gonna handle the backups and stuff like that. So I'm trying to cover those. But these are pretty much the topics I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna start with giving you a very packed slide of options. Maybe a few words on when and how to use cloud storage, what to take into consideration there. Of course, some people have very, very sensitive data, by this I usually mean like data that has identifiable people in it. And there are some pretty tricky things to take into consideration there. Well, a few words on backups and some practical tips what you might want to put in the DMP. Here's the packed slide about options, and it doesn't include everything, obviously, because there are words full of options. My recommendation usually here is that just if you can, try to use the local network storages in university. I know they're a bit strapped in terms of space. I think the personal home folder has something like 5 gigabytes, which is usually not enough. But you can opt to get a group folder, even if you are by yourself. It has a little bit more capacity, but if it works for you, for your purposes, please try to stick with those, because they're backed up and they're kind of secure and everything like that. Of course, they do come with some costs, but the costs aren't really direct costs to you. They are more for your department. And it's kind of up to the department to decide whether they're going to charge you for it. I don't think this happens quite a lot, and I'm not very convinced that the cost is even charged from the departments, because the whole billing process is a mess at the university. And but I do have to kind of say that they do have some costs. But my guess is that if you'll ever see anything, if you're going to get charged for the space, it's not going to be that sum. It's going to be much less, because the prices are updating. But if you need to kind of estimate to your DMP how much money am I going to need for the P drive, unless you're getting like multiple terabytes or thousands of gigabytes, then you can kind of use that and try to guess. Maybe that you don't need the money though. Well, of course, there's a whole category of solutions I like to call do-it-yourself solutions, and I guess the most popular here is like the USB drives and external hard disks that people really buy because they're very cheap and very easily obtained, and they're very handy to have readily available. And but there are risks involved. They are not really that. They tend to get lost and they tend to break up pretty easily. So please don't use them as your only method of saving the data. I mean, you can like put a static copy of your data in the beginning of the project to a hard disk and kind of lock the hard disk away, and that's a very safe way to use it. But just having the only copy of your data in your like bag and carrying it around from campus to campus, I wouldn't recommend that. That is really, really risky. If you have needs for like a huge capacity, you can even, you or your research group can kind of opt to buy a storage server. It's called cheap storage server, but I think they start from like 5,000 euros or so, but they do have like tens of terabytes of space. And we do have lots of research needs which really, really need the capacity. And they can be hosted at university. I mean, you only need to kind of like buy them and have them hosted for you. And the hosting doesn't really cost anything. IT Center does that for you. Obviously, that's not for most people. That's for the very kind of special cases. More commonly, even single researchers do use our virtual servers. That is basically just a computer that you access from internet. Say you need some kind of web page or something, those virtual servers are available. They do have some costs, but I'm very certain that no one has ever paid for them except for the university. And well, we do get paid every now and then for doing their jobs, but apart from that, I don't think they have like costs. But they are still, the costs are somehow listed in Flum, and well, don't mind that. Of course, sometimes it's easier to have a server somewhere else, like in CSC. CSC has those, and I think they're mostly free of charge, but not always. But I have no idea whether they charge or not. I don't think they usually do. And well, yeah, I don't think any one of you is going to need their own like cluster of network attached storage racks. But that is also an option if you really have the need and you kind of have the money. We do have even those hosted at university. Okay, so, but maybe more commonplace solutions for like sharing data. I would like to mention like CSC's Eduni, which is basically just a collaboration platform. It's basically just it's very limited in terms of space. I think it's like less than 100 megabytes, maybe even 50. But it's pretty good for collaborating with people outside of university, because you can kind of do your user account by using Facebook account or Google account or whatever, so to log in there. So it's pretty nice to kind of like invite people from outside there. It's even pretty secure actually. So but it's because the space limitations is good only for like documents and Excel sheets and stuff like that. Of course, we do have our own wiki.helsinki.fi. You can log in there whenever you want to. It's also very low capacity, but you can kind of like start utilizing it whenever you want. You can just log in and create your wiki space and start sharing it with collaborators. People coming from outside university will need to kind of create their own user account there, but that's pretty easily done. You just need to have an email to do that. Well, if you have like, say you have like multiple, hundreds of gigabytes of like static data that you just want to store in some offsite place, I would recommend CSC's IDA. It has no costs. It's fully paid by taxpayers, and it's very high capacity. But there's also some kind of minimum requirement of, I think it's like 200 gigabytes or so. I think the maximum is several terabytes. Kind of depends. They are kind of evaluated case by case basis. But if you have a large set of, say, images that you don't need maybe every day, it's pretty good to use. So it's just like just for static data, maybe not like video editing or something like that, but for putting like huge images there, letting them rest there, for that kind of stuff, it's pretty good. Well, of course, as you all know, there are plenty of cloud storages, world's full of them. At any time, you can of course do what you want as a consumer and go to Google and create your own drive there and share it and put there whatever you do. But we wouldn't recommend doing this as a consumer, because well, you're kind of responsible for the data if you own it, and you should be like you should really know what the end user license agreement says if you decide to go this way, and what are your rights to the data and how can you use the service. You should really familiarize yourself with those things. In order to lessen the pain, we do have OneDrive via University of Helsinki, which is like OneDrive for business. It's a bit different from the consumer version of Microsoft's OneDrive, and the end user license agreement doesn't like change all the time, because it's so like difficult process for Microsoft to kind of change it and negotiate it with all the partners and customers, organizations. So the EULA tends to be a bit more static there. I think this like 1 terabyte by default. I'm not sure if you can extend that, but that's usually plenty for people. And you can also use that for sharing the data. That is a pretty nice feature too. I think the end user license kind of forbids you to put any sensitive data, and the servers reside in Ireland. So if there's any kind of data that needs to reside in Finland, you can't use it for that. In purely technical terms, I think it's relatively safe. I mean, it's not like public repository. Nobody can get there without you giving the access. But if you do have like sensitive data, please don't do this, because EU is kind of updating the regulations regarding sensitive data like next May, and there are going to be some pretty heavy consequences if you kind of break those regulations. We are currently in progress of negotiating with Google, so we would get maybe a common EULA for university with Google too, because people, they like to use Google, and it's pretty good. So that's from consumer point of view. But of course, if you are like loosely associated with University of Helsinki, the cloud storage may be the only like good option, because maybe you take your research somewhere else the next year, so you can't use university services for that. So in those terms, cloud storages are a pretty good option. Even then, I would maybe recommend using EU services. They're like publicly funded, but they are like by EU money. They reside in European Union. So that's something to consider. But there's also a limitation of 20 gigabytes, and so far I've been unable to find out whether you can actually increase the quota even by paying them. I don't think there's an option for that just yet. Okay, so yeah, what to consider if you do use the cloud storage? Well, you can use it whenever no other service really suits your needs, and even if we were to say that no, you can't use it, you're still going to use it. So it's just best to go this through from practical perspective. Well, of course, the data can't be sensitive. You're putting yourself and the data at risk if you do put sensitive data on cloud storages, so don't do that. And we do have this kind of policy on cloud services, which is in Flamma. If you type in those exact words in the search box, you will find it. It's a short read. I think it's like 2 pages or so. So I would recommend maybe looking at that. And of course, you need to be able to live with the end user license agreement. And for these reasons, I would recommend the OneDrive by University of Helsinki or CSS Eduuni. CSS Eduuni I think it's not a cloud service in common sense. I mean, it's hosted in Finland. It's hosted by a publicly funded organization. So it's not a cloud service in a sense. And it's also audited for like sensitive data. So just as long as you don't put some extremely sensitive data, such as criminal records and medical information there. I mean, if you have just maybe lists of people, lists of individuals, that kind of stuff can be there. But you kind of have to consider the implications on that on like case-to-case basis. Well, yeah, if you do use any cloud service, always read the EULA. It's a lot easier with the OneDrive for University of Helsinki. There's actually in the link page there is a link for the EULA, which is very short and pretty easy to read. Or that part of the EULA you really need to read. If you do use cloud services and you kind of select a company that you feel that is secure or is maybe Finnish even, well, please do mind that the companies do buy them. Companies do buy other companies, and this has actually happened with F-Secure. They have this pretty good secure cloud service, which is now an American one. So, and of course, companies that operate on multiple continents or in multiple countries, they will in some cases they may be required to kind of like trample on your privacy because some other country's legislation demands this. This is especially true for American companies who have like a huge consumer base at the States. And they sometimes get off the hook by paying EU some fines. So that's what they don't like to do, that they don't want to trample on your privacy, but they may be required to do that should the legislation demand that. So that's a real risk. And of course some types of data need to reside within Finnish borders or at very least EU. Human data, usually. Finnish social security numbers are probably the example for the kind of data that needs to be in Finland, stay in Finland. And one thing to read from EULA is that can you really ever delete your data? How do they kind of like, how is it put in the EULA? How does the contract work? If you delete it, is it gone? Can they kind of prove it to you? And one pretty common thing to read there is that whether the service provider is actually allowed to delete it for you without even notifying you for that. That is surprisingly common. The companies kind of like hold the rights to do that just in case. They don't really want to do this either, but they still kind of can do that. Of course, reading EULA is very difficult, so you can always contact research data at helsinki.fi if you need assistance with that. Well, of course, then the sensitive data. Usually when people come to me with sensitive data, first question is that, is it really? How sensitive is it? And because sensitivity makes the sharing and staging very difficult. There's not too many good options available. And usually handling this data securely demands encrypting the data, which is a bit tricky at some times. Does the data need to be sensitive? Could it be like anonymized? That's usually something that can be done. I don't think the individuals in the data they are not usually the most interesting part for the research, or only what they like answered. If you have a list where there is some identifier for each individual, maybe you can like say you have like social security number. Maybe you can kind of store the social security numbers elsewhere and just kind of do this unique key and have the rest of the data somewhere else and kind of use the key to connect the data. Of course, if you do have really sensitive data and you do need to kind of handle that in your research, well, then the next consideration is how sensitive it is. What's the worst thing that can happen? And whatever measures you will take to kind of protect the data should be always based on some kind of risk evaluation. Yeah, and that too can be very difficult. Luckily you have experts available. You can contact us always. We have even lawyers available if you really have a tricky case. So don't hesitate to contact. So if you do really have sensitive data, then you could use either virtual server or CSS Eduni. Those are the most recommended. But even the group folders and home folders will do if you use some kind of encryption there. As I mentioned, EU is there's this EU's I think it's data protection regulation or something like that that is coming like next May, and it will be applied also in Finland. And in that law, or in the directive, there is the encryption is explicitly mentioned there as a protection measure. Same as anonymization. So those are at the moment those are considered to be very good protective measures for the data. If you do have sensitive data, just try those, and that will at least that will put you in a less risky position should the data go in wrong hands or something like that. And of course, I would recommend you to kind of try to familiarize yourself with the EU data protection regulation. Not sure if there are, well, of course, there's lots of EU pages where there's lots of English versions of what GDPR means, but the Tietosuojavaltuutettu has also pretty good web pages in Finnish at least. But yeah, if you absolutely must use cloud storage, USB sticks or hard drive or on a laptop, then do use the encryption. But word of warning though, if you do use VeriCrypt, it will ask you a password, and if you lose the password, the data will be encrypted permanently. No one can open it for you. I don't think even NSA can open good encryption for you if they wanted to. So it's pretty safe. But that means that we can't open it for you too. So don't lose the key. And of course, if you do have a Mac or Windows 10 computer, there's also a built-in encryption for the laptop. So that is very recommended to use. But the same warnings apply. Well, yeah, backups then. Usually, two things get mixed up when talking about backups. I get a lot of these people who are kind of like kind of knowledgeable in IT, and they go to Verkkokauppa and then they come with these USB drives with 2 hard disks there, and the one hard disk copies the data automatically to another one, and then they're like, okay, this is my backup. There's like two HDs here, and it's backed up constantly. Well, that's not really true, because should the data in the first hard drive get corrupted, then the second will get corrupted too. So it's not really protected in that sense. It's good for hardware failures. I mean, if your first hard drive breaks down, then it's good to have the other one there. But it's not real backup. Good backup is something that takes multiple versions of the data, multiple full copies, and hopefully allows you to go back to some other for the earlier versions of your data. They are obviously, these kinds of systems are very expensive, and they are pretty rare also. And of course, if you have huge data set, you have terabytes of data, then it usually is not even viable because it's so expensive. But maybe the good practical advice would be to have at least 2 separate copies of your most valuable data. And by separate, I mean that they won't get corrupted if one set gets corrupted. It's a good idea even to have the other set as an off-site copy. I mean, if you have one USB drive at your home office, and then you have another copy of the data at the OneDrive at University of Helsinki, or in the in the service room in the Ireland. Well, that's a pretty good protection, because should your house burn down, you still have the one copy other place. Should the OneDrive go away, then you still have the local copy. Well, easiest way to get a good backup would be to use the personal folder or group folder at University of Helsinki. Those are backed up on a daily basis, I think for 2 months, and they are like physically locked away, the older copies. They're put in this locked room that only very few people have access to. The returning to earlier version of the data is not very automatic. I mean, someone will actually need to go to the room and return your data very physically to the backup robot there, but it can be done. We do that all the time. If you do get a virtual server at the University of Helsinki, that too can be backed up with the same system, though it's really costly. And it's a bit limited. I mean, if you have like multiple terabytes, then the system just won't scale to that amount. Well, most commercial services and all servers at University of Helsinki do have some form of mirroring. So usually it's very uncommon to lose data because of hardware failures if the data on the hardware is kind of handled by a professional organization. And this is obviously how the companies want it to be, because it's bad for business to lose someone's data. So for the practical tips, if you can use the group folders, use the personal home folders. The major limitation there is like the space and the fact that you cannot share the data with people from outside university. Or you can do that, you can kind of apply for user account for them, but that's very tricky, especially if the person doesn't reside anywhere in Finland. So it's a bit tricky, but it's doable though. Well, if you have heightened security requirements, very sensitive data, I would recommend in any case contact us, please, because in that way we'll know kind of how much sensitive data there is, what kind of solutions are needed in future, what can we do to help your needs in the future. So please contact us for that reason, and also of course for the reason that you will get a good secure storage. And obviously, if you're going to buy a server and want it to be hosted at university, well, you do need to contact us. We can't take any servers. There are some specifications we really need to enforce there. What you can put in the DMP here is that if you use the group folder as a home folder, you just make it known that it's a repository backed up and by University of Helsinki. There's a professional organization keeping my data secure. And I don't think you really need to write anything else regarding that. And of course, if you need to share some data, use a cloud service for that, and then you want to maybe store some huge static data sets at the CSS IDA, that's fine too. You can use multiple services for multiple needs, but just be sure that you kind of open the process, how you're doing stuff, how you're handling data in the DMP. It doesn't need to be in very detail. There doesn't need to be that much detail there, but kind of just a broad view on how you're going to do stuff. Of course, well, as I warned before, I wouldn't recommend USB drives for anything else but holding a static copy of the data. Hopefully you'll log it away also if you do take a static copy. But something not to write on the DMP is that I'm going to take daily copies to my USB drive, because I don't think anyone's going to believe that, and I know myself I couldn't do that even if I wanted to. And most people really can't do that. They tend to forget and kind of stop taking the copies. And one thing to remember is that DMP is a plan, and plans do change. You may not know what you actually need before you start your research. Best thing to put in the DMP would be to try to convey that you understand the issues, and you have a plan that you're planning to start with these services, but you will kind of evaluate your needs during the project and make changes if necessary. Just try to convey that you work actively to keep the data safe. And well, if no services suit your need, contact researchdata@helsinki.fi and we'll try to find something that will help you. Okay, and there are the links, but best not to click now here. Okay. Okay, thanks, Petteri. Any questions on these issues?
Yeah.